All right, welcome to our second Learning Bitcoin and Design call about covenants. So today I think the idea was to go deeper into covenant use cases, right? Last time the first call was more about just generally what it is and what it does. And then now we wanted to go deeper. And I think on the on the GitHub issue, there was one request about congestion control, and then the other big one was scaling. I think so. But how's everyone? How are you feeling about covenants today? Maybe we should just pick up, wherever our brains are.
Well, so I'm feeling bullish on covenants.
Okay.
No, but it's I think it opens up or they open up a ton of fascinating capabilities that I would personally probably want. But in terms of whether what the, let's say, the technical soundness or the security implications, there's nothing I can contribute.
Mhm.
And but in general, I'm kind of more probably interested in these kind of vaulting or kind of scripting stuff than scaling.
Mhm.
But that's just the nature of what I'm working on currently. So that's not at all um, some kind of judgment or so, but it's just
Mhm.
in terms of the scaling question, I I'm not sure how valid any of the things that I'm going to say or I have to say or think is relevant.
Yeah.
But it's it's really interesting. And what stuck from the last call was, I think Owen said you can in terms of scaling, you can transfer ownership without on chain transactions and have the same assurances. So that's definitely something uh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So Owen's threads here. He has three threads. They're really awesome. I tried to earlier. I tried to sit down and actually understand that specific part. I tried to understand how does this enable any sort of scaling, and how do you transfer ownership off chain? And there's this one thread here that talks about. I don't think it's this one actually, where it's something. On the one hand, it kind of makes sense, but I was missing. There was something I was missing from it too. And let me maybe I'll try to explain and try to get there. There was one thread with an example that I thought was pretty good. Um, so here's kind of what I came up with, which kind of helps maybe with the scaling stuff. So, and I tried to create a very simple example of this. So there are three people: Alice, Robert, and Charles. Right? Robert owes Alice 0.1 Bitcoin, and Charles owes Robert 0.2 Bitcoin. So what they would do right now is, right, Robert sends Alice 1.0.1 Bitcoin, and Charles sends Robert 0.2 Bitcoin. Right, two transactions done. Cool. Now let's make this way more complicated. So, so Alice gives Robert the address, like Alice's address one. Cool. So Robert could technically now just send her 0.Bitcoin and be done. But he makes it more difficult. So he creates his own address because he's expecting money from uh, Charles. I think this needs to be Charles, right? Charles needs to send him money. So Robert creates an address, Robert's address one, and that one has rules baked into. So any funds that go into this address, 0.1 of that has to go to Alice's address. right? So when he receives zero, whatever he receives, 0.1 is reserved for Alice, and no one will ever be able to change that. That's just how it is. It cannot be used anywhere else. And then rule number 2 is that another 0.1 should go towards a lightning channel with Dan. So those are rules baked into, right? And then in this address, then Robert gives this address to Charles. Charles puts the 0.2 Bitcoin in. Now we have this Robert's address with 0.2 Bitcoin. And those addresses cannot be freely spent, right? 0.1 has to go to Alice, and 0.1 has to go to this lightning channel with Dan. That's it. So, but only Robert knows this because he baked this into the address. No one else knows about this, right? On the blockchain, it's like, hey, there's an address with 0.2 Bitcoin. Cool, that's it. But so Robert tells Alice, hey, look at this address. There's a rule baked into this one. So Alice looks at the address and she's like, cool, that is true. There's 0.1 Bitcoin in your address. But at some point, they can only be spent to me. So, right, Robert still has them, but the only thing that can be done with them is to give them to me. Is that as good as me having them? Right? You could say yes. Like there's a promise in there that cannot be broken. So Alice now says, cool, they're not technically in my address, but they kind of have to go there. So it's like they're mine, but they're not really. But they are and they aren't. Schrodinger's cat or whatever. And then Robert shows Dan the address and the rule number 2, and then he can open up a lightning channel with them. And because even right, because there's this promise that cannot be changed. So in a way, there was one transaction that happened. So Charles sends those 0.2 Bitcoin. But actually, we accomplished 3 things at the same time. So literally on the blockchain, 0.2 were sent from Charles to Robert. So that debt is kind of settled. And then there are these baked in promises that 0.1 will go to Alice and another 0.1 will go to the lightning channel with Robert and Dan, right? So without covenants, that would be 3 different things. With covenants, they're 1.
Plus Alice, since Alice probably gave, I mean, it depends on what kind of address Alice gave to Robert.
Yeah.
So if that's a normal kind of address, she can then spend this 0.01 0.1 freely as well, right? So
Yeah.
basically you can then daisy chain transactions onto this.
Yeah, you're basically unwinding a bunch of stuff then. Like you're winding up things, right? Or you bake in all these promises, but then you can build promises on promises and promises and promises. But then the question is then, and that's something Owen also wrote in his thread, it's like, can you do that forever? Or does at some point this whole thing just kind of have to, unwind?
I think this is what he meant with the trees, right?
Yeah.
With these kind of layers of trees.
Yeah.
Where it always depends what the next hop is going to do.
Yeah. And your point was this Alice's address, it could also hold promises to other people.
Exactly.
Maybe
or
she
it could
wanted
just
to.
be a safe. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's also something that nobody else knows.
Yeah. So I think it's like but the thing is, if Robert forgets the rules, then like no one can recover them. No one will know them. Right? Because they're not saved anywhere on chain. They only exist because he baked them in, and if he forgets them, then doesn't share, then they're gone. So I guess that's where I have a whole bunch of questions about how can all of this fall apart if someone forgets something, right? And then all this stuff gets locked, or is there always a way out to unwind it where anyone can just back out of this whole system? Like, screw it, I don't like these shenanigans. And if, let's say, you do that 3 times in a row, and I want to, I'm secretly paying Mo, and I'm like, yeah, these Bitcoin, they're actually yours, but really they're in Michael's address, and you have with this rule, but then they're in Lorik's address in this rule, and he paid me before, and it's with that rule, and then they're actually Bitcoin that my mom sent 4 years ago with that other rule, and then it came from like over there. It's like, do I need to like do I need to do all that stuff, or do I not, or like how do I prove then that, and will you accept it when you're like, this is way too complicated for me, just give me my money, you know?
Well, the way that I understood it is I mean, all of these checks are automated in the background, right? So the address that I give you is only spendable by my rules, or kind of
Mm-hmm.
if you receive something into this address, then I have the assurance that
Mm-hmm.
I can spend it the way I want to spend them.
Yeah.
And that's all of these rule checking that you just described, and that's how I understood it, that it works.
Yeah.
No, when we spoke about use cases, and I'm just thinking about the scenario that Christoph presented. I personally would never enter into such a scenario because there's just too much of he said, she said, I promise, you promise, he promises, they promise. If I would think of a very practical use case, I would just think of a family, um, using it between three people, the husband and then the wife and then the kid. The kid has their own Bitcoin savings for their university or whatever they want to study for. And then the couple has an account, and it's a joint Bitcoin account, and both of them are earning Bitcoin. And every time money comes in, they both agree that there's a rule that 5% of that goes to the kids' university fund. It's a covenant between them. And then it's safe, it's trusted, it's the husband and the wife. There's not too many people making promises.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe between the husband and wife, they have their own covenant, which is like, okay, certain percentage is 10% goes for our holiday, and then that is that own covenant. I mean, I'm just trying to think of a very practical use case in a situation which I think would practically work. But I think the more people you add on to this, I promise, he promises, she promises, they promise,
Yeah.
it's too.
But see, the trick
Um,
is you might not even know, because on chain these addresses look like regular addresses. There might be all kinds of stuff
yeah,
baked
Yeah.
in, but you just can't
So
see it.
yeah,
so that's the part which part of this construct is um, kind of conscious, and which not, right? Because I just want to send you money,
hmm,
and the only thing that I have to know and you have to know is that I can spend that money and it goes to you, and then you can spend it freely afterwards.
hmm,
So that means consciously we don't even need to know it. It doesn't concern us. This huge construct doesn't concern us. The only thing
mm,
that we need to know is that we can spend that money. And
yeah,
so this is not a kind of um, a an attempt to set up this big construct, uh, because nobody has a use case like that. It's just that we need to have the assurances that whatever we want to do it with the money can be
Mm.
done,
Yeah.
right? So I think we have to separate the part that is kind of for each person in that line of succession. Um, the only thing they need to know is they can spend the way they want to
Yeah.
spend,
Yeah, it's
and
true.
that's all automated basically. Nobody at the beginning, no. If I'm in the middle of this whole sequence, I don't need to know what's before it, and I also don't need to know what's after it, right?
Mhm.
So I just need to know that whatever comes into this address can be spent the way I want. That's
Yeah.
that's it.
mm,
Yeah, and it's true, Mo. You define your own rules because it's your address, right?
mm,
So no one can force
Yeah.
rules on you, really.
So you're not part of some kind of bigger kind of scheme, but you're just receiving and sending. everything that we kind of talked about is basically happening in the background, and it shouldn't even really
Right.
concern you.
Because the protocol
But
is making sure that all of those conditions are met.
exactly, but you should be able to say, okay, I received like these 0.1 Bitcoin, and then I want, because these are mine and I want to spend them, I want to automatically put, I don't know, I want to put 10% of that into my savings wallet,
Yeah.
and the rest I just send to people. So these are then your rules, right? So that, and everything, it's basically one hop after that. And the question that Christoph raised is, does it break at some point, right? Or is it, can you do this forever?
Good question.
No, I guess, I'm not, to continue on that thought, I'm not sure if what I said was actually right, that no one can force things on you. So here, Robert tells Alice, hey, look at this address. There are funds in there for you.
Mhm.
But they're not how can she already send them to someone else?
No, I mean, the point is, it has to be, the funds have to be sent to the address that Alice gave him. So, and then
Yeah.
Alice has enough assurances because she constructed the address, uh, and the address contains the spending conditions or the kind of the policy. So that means once the funds hit her address, she knows that she can spend them.
Okay, so how about, so I think the way that Owen put it was there's like a PSBT in there. So instead of, so Robert really doesn't have to pay any fees there, but eventually Alice will have to. So so let's say fees are $200, right? And I'm like, check Alice, you know, you're at the $100 I'm supposed to send you. They're right there. You can grab them, but then she has to pay the fees instead of he being the sender who puts it in her address for paying the fees. He kind of gets around the fees and kind of puts that on her in a way, right? Because it's almost like she has to withdraw them. Or is it, if it's a PSBT? I don't know, if it's a fully signed transaction baked in, then I guess it's still on him. Or is it on, yeah, I guess who pays the fees then in that regard? How does that trickle back?
I'm trying to see what Bitcoin technical search is going to provide, but I actually said, how do fees with covenants work? I'm just reading through whatever's coming up here. So
Maybe no one even knows, yeah.
yeah, exactly. There's no direct there's no direct article about it. It's just
So here's another one, if you're cool with looking at something else. I was trying to figure out how payment pools work, which are also supposed to be this technique. So basically, Robert, Alice, and Charles, we want to create a payment pool. So we collaboratively create an address that has some rules that we put stuff in. So on chain, there's an address with funds in it. That's all that people see. But baked into this, there are a few rules. So Robert puts 0.1 Bitcoin in, Alice 0.2, and Charles 0.3. And then the rules that say this is how much everyone owns, right? So there are rules that each of them can exit this arrangement and they just get the 0.1 back, right? Then there's another rule that if all of them agree, the funds can be split up differently. So Robert can get it all and Alice nothing, or Alice can get 0.4 and the other 0.1, whatever it is. Like they can exit with a different arrangement. So that basically means between the three of them, there's now these funds. It's a little bit like lightning, right? You have these funds locked up between the three of them, and then it's just like splitwise. One day, one person pays for lunch. They're like, "Okay, cool. I'm keeping track that I owe you this much," and then they do something else, and then at some point they can just settle the whole thing and collapse it into one on-chain transaction. So it's a bit like splitwise and all that. So yeah, they pay Jill a bunch of times. 1 year later, Alice says, "Screw you guys, I'm done with this. Let's settle." So cool. So that's it. It seems like an overly complicated way of doing things for three friends that can just talk to each other and actually use splitwise, right? Why go through all these shenanigans? So that's why I put this thing here. Well, where is this useful? Is it useful in, let's say, there are three companies that are banks that, across countries that need to settle between them regularly, or where there's not such a trusted scenario? Then the other thing in the examples was that, well, someone can exit from a pool and the others can continue in the same pool, or they can spend and split it up and go into another pool, and then it's like, awesome, cool, but what do you like? That was one of the things that I read. It's like you can have pools and pools and pools, and they're all linked. And I thought, I don't get it. What's the like? What are you actually achieving here? That doesn't seem. And then who tracks all of this stuff, right? So I don't know. That was my that was so far my insight into payment pools, and I don't. I feel like I'm missing something still, but I also didn't spend a ton of time on it, so I don't know.
So is there's this is a protocol layer thing that it's that makes sure that these agreements are met, and then it makes sure that everything goes on agreement underneath the hood. So it is a protocol layer that will continuously be worked on so that the rules are constantly updated according to the needs of the network. I mean, this is just the thing that I'm trying to understand as well. Like is there one dedicated developer now working on covenants, or how is it like?
Gotcha. So, what all of this stuff, both examples here, they're based on the same thing, that you can bake rules into addresses that no one can change,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then everyone has to follow that. It's actually a somewhat simple idea, right?
Yeah.
Just what can be done with the Bitcoin in that are deposit put in this address. And this, as far as I know, this idea has been around for a very long time. And there
Yeah.
are, if you go to, what is it, covenants.info, let me switch over real quick. Um,
Yeah, 2016, I see one of the first talks given about it.
yeah, covenants.info. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different, there are 9 different proposals around there. And
Yeah.
from the Stefan Livera podcast,
Mhm.
they have various different technical complexities. So generally, people want like the simplest version because there's the lowest risk that anything can break. It's easiest to reason about.
Mm-hmm.
And each technical solution has kind of it allows you to do things slightly differently, right? And it's important to think through how these differences could play out over time and what they could lead to. Uh, so yeah, that's why nothing's been. And then there are these different use cases and stuff, and some is more, you know, um, not spectacular. What is it called? Speculative than others. So yeah, nothing. No one's decided on anything. It does feel like a whole bunch of people really want this to happen, and others
Mm-hmm.
say, well, there's no real urgent need. We have other problems and other things to figure out. So yeah,
Yeah.
and there's also seems to be some confusion right now about how you actually make change to Bitcoin. Um, you know,
Yeah. So I think that's also why Owen focused on CTV, which is one version of implementation version of uh, what Christoph just mentioned, because that seems to be the most widely kind of accepted one and best studied. But yeah, I mean, any kind of assessment of viability is far beyond my.
and so the are you there, Michael?
I'm here.
Okay,
I'm back.
cool. Yeah, sorry, it just froze for me for a little bit.
Okay.
One extra thing was that it's not like these things are just get discussed and then someone decides and then they get implemented. Some of
Yeah.
these things have been implemented on testnet or rectest or maybe even on other chains. So you can kind of see in practice how they pan out. I feel like Liquid even had something like that for example. So there are these practical explorations that take you to a certain point. But yeah, the bar is just really, really high for any of this.
Yeah, and then you have the concern or people. I mean, if you let's say if we take this scaling example, what kind of impact does this have on miners who actually secure the network? It could collapse their income, basically. What's the kind of the impacts of that? And just don't know because if you can collapse one, 10 transactions into one, then obviously there is an economic impact. So that's why it's also maybe taking, apart from the security concerns, that's another thing to consider.
Maybe the Bitcoin network in the future, all of the actual transactions will just be really cheap and we just live off of the money from art collectors and all the JPEGs will cost millions. And it's just art funding the network.
Yeah.
Art.
So apparently, there's also some people also write white paper. Well, not white papers, but they write. There's something called vaults and covenants as well. And in this paper, we examine how they might be implemented. Okay, da, da, da. New approach is presented which avoids pitfalls of general covenant proposals. So as Christoph said, there's many different covenant proposals, and then each proposal has its own pitfalls.
Yeah. And vaults, I don't know, I feel like vaults are more of an implementation or a use case for covenants.
Exactly, a use case for covenants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like scaling is a use case. And that's why, or one of the things that kind of, because covenants take so long, that's why in the last maybe 12 months, the interest in Miniscript picked up, or 18 months, picked up significantly because you can actually program similar or not quite as sophisticated stuff like with governance, but you can achieve some kind of programmability with Miniscript already, right? With what we have now, and so that's kind of the dynamic. Basically, Covenants would take that programmability to the next level, definitely.
So chat PDF to the rescue. I downloaded that white paper. It's called Vaults and Covenants. It's 13 pages, published 9 January 2023. And I uploaded to chat PDF and I asked how vaults are related to covenants. And basically it's a storage mechanism. So it's something, yeah. It's more for more security. But yeah, there's a 13-page article on vaults and covenants if you'd like to read it. Vaults are a technique for substantially reducing the risk of Bitcoin theft. They are a form of covenant that give Bitcoin users operational simplicity but heightened security.
I mean, this definition of a vault, I mean, it really depends on what you. This is a technical description of the implementation of vault or vault, but you can also understand a vault just as an application. You can create a vault from a different type of covenant proposal, right? So I have a hard time to actually I see a vault as an object and not as an implementation.
A feature.
Right? A feature, exactly, a feature or a use case.
Yeah.
vault is a use case, and but for me, and I'm a technical layman, but I have the feeling it's more helpful to think of vaults as the feature or the thing that you want to achieve rather than the way of achieving it.
By the way, did you see Owen's Figma prototype? Do
No.
you want to look at that one, or do you want to continue with the vault?
No, let's see the prototype. Let's see the. I mean, I'm keen on seeing it. If everyone else is open to it as well.
I'll share that link, the Figma link here. So he mocked up the idea of cold channels. So that's what earlier in the example, I think, what is it, Alice, Robert, whoever said, well, part of this deposit is dedicated to a lightning channel, right? So that lightning channel is not technically active. There are no nodes talking to each other and stuff, but the funds are dedicated to it, right? It's just kind of like secretly committed to this lightning channel. And so typically you do need to create a new on-chain transaction to get funds into that state, but here you kind of have that automatically. So it saves you a transaction, and you kind of have this secret, what he calls cold channels, or in this case, reserves. So let's say you're in Phoenix here, and someone sent you 0.1 Bitcoin or whatever, and you created an on-chain address with this cold channel option. So then that would go into what he calls reserves. So here you would, in this example, the balance is 433,000 sats plus 1.3 million in reserves. So that means if he ever runs low on liquidity, he could activate his reserves, like activate these cold channels for free, I think. So what can I click here? So I can receive. Yeah, here. Let me get my head out of the way. So here you can see that I can choose between regular addresses, or what he calls simple address, and cold channel addresses. Yeah. So it looks pretty much like a regular address, but anything received to that has the cold channel option. And then I want more liquidity, then I can see, here are all these different deposits that I can activate. And then I activate one, I confirm it. Cool. Sweet. I have now 300,000 more sats that I can spend on Lightning, basically for free and instant. I think there just needs to be this connection needs to be established with the other node. But because the on-chain transaction is taken care of already, you save those 10 minutes or that block confirmation. Yeah. How does that sound?
Gosh, there was a lot to take in.
Dormant lightning channel.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, it says each reserve is a dormant lightning channel ready to activate and use countless individual smaller payments over a longer period of time. When any channel is finally depleted, it must be closed. So what is it saving? It's saving just some a transaction fee in the future.
Sorry, what was the first thing that you read? I didn't quite catch where that came from.
Oh, it was the final page in this little prototype.
Oh, okay. Let me take a look at that one. Where is it? Under receive, or how do I get there?
Oh, just keep clicking. It's after it says activate this reserve, activate now. The one page back after that.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Here at the bottom?
Yeah.
No.
Oh no, not that page.
No.
Try going one more.
Oops. It failed.
Back, maybe
Here?
back.
There's no back here anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry. Let me see.
Maybe under receive?
It was activate reserves. It was starting at 1, 2, 3, 4. It was the fourth screen. Oh, I was just clicking along the bottom navigator. I wasn't using the prototyping. I was
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, this one, the receive with the payment tree leaf. Yeah, that's a whole different thing. That's not the cold.
No, it wasn't. But it's fine. It was just a general definition of what was going on, and I was just trying to get my head around the what exactly was going on.
Yeah, I mean, so the way it typically works is that you receive funds in your address, and then when you want to open a Lightning channel, that is another transaction,
Right.
and that takes 10 minutes to confirm. And yeah, that's basically it. You have to pay another fee. It takes 10 minutes. But with you can kind of collapse this into one using covenants,
I
right?
see.
So you get these funds, and it's like they're just primed for a Lightning channel. They're not the channel is not active, but it's all ready for it. It's all set up. So you don't need to wait another 10 minutes. You don't need to pay the extra fee. It's like you just need to say, "Let's go," and the channel's right there. But you don't have to, right? It's like an option, a free option to have a Lightning channel.
Right. And that's through covenants.
Yeah. So it's kind of
So
cool.
you could also you could just also send it as a normal on-chain transaction in that case, right?
Yep, you can
As long as
either
it-
use it as a regular online chain transaction or as a Lightning channel. It's up to you. There may or may not be a delay in there. That's something that I wasn't quite clear on, because if, let's say, I promise the Lightning channel on the one hand, and then I have the option to spend it in another way, how is that? How do I prevent some scamming there if there's not a time lock or some other mechanism that people can hold me accountable for it? That's one thing I wasn't quite sure on. But this is the basic idea, and I really liked how Owen mocked this up. It's very, very in your face. It explains a lot. I don't know if we need all that in the future, but I think that's a really good way to start this, to put it in a UI. Okay, Mo, what are your questions?
No, I was clicking around on the prototype and just trying to actually understand. So we discussed a bit of how it works, like what a covenant is. So I'm trying to click through the UI and try to get the theory that I have in my brain and see how that's making sense on the actual design. So these sort of, if I'm understanding correctly, the reserves are actually the agreements, or rather the covenants that I have with other people. Is that correct? Or yeah,
So you are
that's how I'm understanding it.
Robert here.
Mm-hmm.
You created an address, and there was a rule baked in there that some of this can go to a Lightning channel with a specific person.
Mm-hmm.
You made this commitment,
Mm-hmm.
so that's baked into the address, and that's why other people can trust. Right? You're good for this. You've committed your funds.
Yeah. And that's the fund that's called a reserve in this UI, in this design that we like this one here.
Yeah.
This is that reserve bit is this bit here. That's this.
Yeah.
Like I have an agreement between me and John that he gives me 1%, and you can count on this 1%. It's here. And then I have another agreement with Mary, and this is the agreement I have with her. So if I want to, I can use this because it's my stats. I just activate it, and then I can use it in my transactions.
Yeah, you just activated a channel that was very well prepared, but was not
Right.
quite active yet.
Got you.
And the terminology, of course, is something that may or may not change. He uses the term cold channels in here and reserves, and
Yeah.
but then it's obviously a new term So no one knows really what it means unless you actually worked on it. So that all of this stuff is usual, communication stuff.
Yes. So in this case, all of these cold channels together are the reserves, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Right.
And the covenant is just basically a rule or a smart contract or kind of I mean, even a normal single sig or a multi-sig address are a covenant or a type of covenant because they define how funds can be spent from
Mm-hmm.
that address.
So is that why? Yeah, no, go ahead.
So it's it's a bit kind of confusing discussion because it's kind of the concept of covenants. It's just about enhancing the programmability of the existing system, right? And you can do that in a bunch of different ways. And all these covenant proposals are each a different way of enhancing uh, or implementing this. Um, but a covenant is just a bunch of rules.
So if I understand this correctly, then I actually entered into. Would you say so? Then I entered into a covenant with this person over here on the 12th of July, and now I'm trying to activate this covenant. But this person set a rule. Well, this is not a rule. This is that because the channel partner is unresponsive. But this could be like a notification that would pop up to say that this person who you entered into a covenant with, um, yeah, this is only available in 4 weeks or something like this. Does that make sense what I just said?
Yeah. So the way it works here is that this other person doesn't even know that you want to have this channel with them, right? You haven't revealed that yet. So you
Yeah.
baked into your address. You said, I want to have the option for these funds to have a Lightning channel with Michael, but I'm not going to
Right.
tell him, right? I'm just going to bake that in. And then at some point when you say, well, I want to get, finally it's time, I want this Lightning channel with Michael. But maybe Michael's node is just not online right now. Then you just can't make that connection, right? He's just not, his phone, his computer, his nodes down, whatever. Maybe he got a new wallet or has changed his nodes or whatever it is. If you
Right.
waited like 6 months, then maybe it's just not, that connection cannot be made anymore. So and that's why this might fail. But you always
Right.
have the option to just, okay, cool, leave the funds there or just put it onto another address, and then that's just not going to happen, that Lightning channel.
Interesting. I mean, just all sorts of things from the UI here as well. Is like, I don't know what I clicked on. Enter an on-chain address to receive the withdrawn funds. So now it's working. The technical problem doesn't exist now.
No, it is exist. You're just taking the other route. You're kind of giving up on this channel with Michael, and
Okay.
you're just putting the funds somewhere else because you just don't want that. That reserve is useless to you. Michael's just, he's not. It's not going to work out. You give up. So you're just
Okay.
like, okay, I'm going to put the funds in my cold wallet, or I'm going to pay rent or something. I'm just going to do something else with it.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Wow. If you think that lightning channels was something to get around people's
Well,
heads, this is like whoa, whoa, whoa.
yeah,
Goodness
in
me.
from a UX perspective, is actually I don't do much different than I do today. All these kind of discussions are about the logic that happens in the background.
Right.
So once once you give me an address and I send funds to that address, whether it be an on-chain transaction or kind of like a covenant-enabled promise, then you can spend and you can do whatever you want. You don't even know about all of these things. So yeah, you might just pay or not pay a transaction fee, and
Yeah.
that was one of the questions. But idea or in general, you don't even actually touch these concepts as a user.
Ideally, and that's why we need wallets to be really smart for people. So wallets can just notify people and says, "Hey, there are some old reserves that we just can't make a connection anymore," or "Hey, your liquidity is low. I prepared something for you. If you want to, you can just enable that real quick, and you're good to go." All of this stuff is ideally automated and intelligent.
Exactly.
And we are here to design this and make
Yeah.
and implement it and make it happen. Work with the developers and all that.
Yeah, one of these use cases that I thought about that we didn't discuss yet is, or something like it, is kind of an escrow address or an escrow wallet, where all the parties have to preemptively inspect the address, whether it actually matches what they agreed on. I mean, so far we talked whether I can spend something or not. But this would be something where I would have to know beforehand if funds are deposited into that address, if that still works as intended per our agreement, and that's probably for another call since we have like 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I think it would be cool to, as a follow-ups to these understand calls, just to a bunch of jam sessions and just design these UIs and just feel out what this would actually be like and what we need. Like when I generate an address, do I need like this whole rule builder thing now? When I paste in an address, do I need to have an option? It's like add a rule. Like someone gave me a rule for this address. Can you just verify? And then what does that look like? And if I have my transaction list, and it's like I don't know, it feels like that's why I think would be really interesting to figure out how you would actually interact with this stuff.
Some kind of visualizer. I was thinking about this with Miniscript descriptors, wallet descriptors, because they are like this long, right? If you have a 2 or 3, after 6 months it's a 1 or 3, after another 6 months a fourth key gets activated, and you need somebody would need to visually see not just a string of like 9,000 characters but they would need to kind of visualize that to actually reason about it. So it's something.
I'm a little late to the party. I'm sorry, but that's what happens that as time increases, more keys get added to it?
No, it's a different discussion from covenants, but in order to be, you can do this with Miniscript wallets already, but you can say, so I say I have a 2 or 3 multisig, but after 6 months I want to have this to be the threshold to be lowered to 1 of 3.
You set that up in advance?
You set that up in advance, and you set up while you set up the wallet. But then when you import it somewhere else, you want to verify that it actually does what I think it does. And currently, the only way to do that is you have a string of text, and there's no way for normal people to actually know what it does.
Right.
And kind of a visualizer or visualization pattern template tool for these kinds of things might be even more needed for something like escrow addresses and escrow wallets, because you want to inspect the contract before you enter into it or deposit money into it.
Right.
Design huddle for covenants.
Let's go.
My brain's getting pretty fried here.
Same.
Yeah, I think it's a good time
Same.
to call it a covenant day and continue next week or the week after that. I mean,
do you feel like do Do you feel like we need another learning session on this one, or do you feel like we've kind of tapped out a good amount of the use cases and ideas?
We could maybe do an iteration with Owen based on this call, where we basically we're guessing on our own, and maybe take this one of these use cases and go through just with one thing, nothing else.
Do you know that saying that the best way to get something validated is, or the best way to find out how to do something is to do it wrong and show it to people?
Exactly.
There's something like that. I'm just
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
curious if we should just design a bunch of stuff where we're like, it's probably something like
We
that,
don't know what we're
and then
doing,
show
but
it, and then that will trigger some responses quickly.
Yeah, that was basically, that's describing my entire high school and academic career.
perfect.
Yeah, let's do it.
Real quick, I know everybody's brains fried, but the oracles? Is there any oracles on Bitcoin? And the oracles, do they dovetail with covenants at all?
How much do you know about oracles?
I mean, just they're kind of receive data from the real world and then link to the blockchain somehow.
Yeah. So my understanding is it's just exactly that. Like it's like a connection between the real world and the blockchain. Like if something gets evaluated, like how do you get the current price of a euro? How do you get the temperature? How do you get like if there's some betting thing, how do you get the end result of some soccer game or something? How do you get that in there? So I feel like it's just basically just a fancy word for an API call.
Right.
It's like,
Then
hey, here's a price API, and you just at some point you're like, okay, API, what's the price or value? So yeah,
right.
thanks for
I guess
joining.
the trusted nature of it, I guess, becomes like a sticking point, I guess.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like there's no such thing as an on-chain oracle and all of this stuff, and I feel like some of it is just kind of a big hype and whatnot. So I don't know. That's my understanding. So it's a source of data. You have to trust it and make sure you can rely on it.
Right. No, the only reason I brought it up was there's this thing called a Tong Teen, I think, where people join a group and then whoever's the last person that died gets the money. So that's always what came to mind when I was thinking about oracles. I think it's from an old Simpsons episode.
Yeah, especially with betting and some of this stuff. People seem to love betting markets. It seems to be just kind of thing a lot of people like. That's where that always comes in. Or also these price feeds for, like, let's say, actually for stabilizing Bitcoin value, that page, if you want to have some synthetic dollar or euro or so, you at some point you kind of need to know what that value is. And that's where you need an oracle. But it's just, I mean, it sounds like magical and stuff, but it's just like a data feed.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. My brain's fried.
I zoned out for a bit. I was continuing with my design because I'm just done.
Yeah. Cool. Let's stop the recording then. For anyone watching, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.